The best of Money Matters. The Big Story.
Welcome to The Big Story. I'm Hongbin Jeong. U.S. President Donald Trump says that he would be willing to reduce tariffs to get a deal done with TikTok's Chinese parent, ByteDance, to sell the short video app used by 170 million Americans. Now, that says ByteDance faces an April 5th deadline to find a non-Chinese buyer for TikTok or face a U.S. ban on national security grounds that was supposed to have taken effect in January under a 2024 law. Now, the law stems from concerns in Washington that TikTok's ownership by ByteDance ties it to the Chinese government, potentially allowing Beijing to use the app for influence, operations, and data collection on Americans. Now, Trump's willingness of leniency also comes as he further ratcheted up the global trade war, pressing ahead with a 25% tariff on all imported auto vehicles. Now, how might China respond to this, and would this be something China will be willing to negotiate? Well, joining us today is Dr. Dylan Loh, who is the Assistant Professor of Public Policy and Global Affairs at Nanyang Technological University. Hello, Dr. Loh. Welcome to the show.
Hello. Happy to be here. Thank you for the invite.
Thank you so much for joining us. Dr. Loh, Mr. Trump says he is willing to extend the April deadline of the TikTok ban if an agreement over the social media app is not reached. How significant is Trump's willingness to reduce tariffs in exchange for a deal with TikTok's Chinese parent ByteDance?
Right. I think it is significant in the context of TikTok's sale. A couple of things to note here. I think first, it indicates a very clear willingness by the Trump administration to push through this deal by making some concessions. And the second part to it, I think it also indicates quite clearly the level of personal importance Trump is placing on the sale of TikTok and the conclusion of its successful sale. I think we see the interplay between national security and economic interest intertwined in this TikTok situation. But in the context, to answer your question, it is very significant in the context of TikTok's sale for sure.
I see. Well, does this signal that the sale of TikTok is a priority for his administration and, important enough to use tariffs as a bargaining chip with Beijing?
Right. My perspective is all the indicators tell us that this is certainly the case. And for good reasons, because there are genuine national security concerns that Republicans and Democrats have been pushing with the amount of U.S. data that TikTok holds, and you alluded to this earlier in your introduction about possibility of foreign influence as well. During his campaign, importantly also during his campaign, he and his team actually also used TikTok quite adeptly to reach out to young voters. So there is, again, that intertwining of political strategy, economic interest, and that national security angle. So it definitely is important enough where he's sitting at to use tariffs as a bargaining chip.
Right. Well, in an economic perspective, though, is this a good trade-off?
I would come in from the perspective that it's not precise to completely look at it from a pure economic angle. Of course, there's an economic angle. TikTok is an entrenched social media behemoth with vast amount of data that could be further monetized. But to me, it's clear that there's a political angle. Sealing the deal for TikTok would work in his favor, I think, because he can tout it very clearly as a win, one of his promises. And of course, there's that geopolitical angle that we talked about. So I believe that the political angle actually features much more prominently than the economic angle on the TikTok sale itself.
I see. Well, how might this deal then influence U.S.-China relations, and could it be perceived as a shift in U.S. foreign policy toward China?
I would not go so far as to say that this episode or this development represents a shift. In fact, I would say that this is, in fact, a classic Trump playbook where you offer some concession or you go on the offense when your partner or your counterpart least expects it, and you put the other party on the back foot, or you force the other party to be reactive rather than proactive. Of course, the conclusion of the sale would be good in the context of U.S.-China relations because it shows very clearly that, hey, look, both countries, even though tensions are high, some agreement is possible, some deal is possible. They can go to the table and reach some sort of agreement. So that is to be welcomed. And it could hopefully set the tone for other thorny areas of the relationship as well.
I see. Well, getting China to agree to any deal to give up control of a business worth tens of billions of dollars has always been the biggest sticking point to, getting any agreement finalized. So how might China respond to Mr. Trump? I mean, would this be something China would be willing to negotiate?
But personally, I think that China will give serious consideration, serious thought to this.
Okay.
I mean, I cannot speak for Beijing, but I think this is one of the thorns in their relationship, a fairly low-hanging one. And if Beijing sees this as being able to generate some sort of goodwill with Trump, allowing them to open up other avenues to cooperate or to advance their relationship or to normalize their relationship. So I suspect that they will be at the very least open to considering this proposal. I don't think this will be completely rejected right off the bat.
I see. Then what precedent would Trump's willingness to reduce tariffs for a deal with ByteDance set for future trade negotiations with China or other countries? And how might this influence future U.S. trade policy?
Right. I don't think this necessarily sets any precedent here because we see it from Trump 1.0 and in the early days of the Trump administration now that it's quite a classic playbook from Trump. In fact, we do see that when he announced the initial tariffs on Canada and Mexico, paused it, resumed it. So this sort of willingness to reduce tariff or to change track is not new. To me, I think the risk for other countries or the thing to keep in mind is that with Trump, there will possibly be higher highs and lower lows. The signal is that also obviously the administration is willing to negotiate and cut a deal. Now, the flip side to that would be countries in their own calculation may wonder about U.S. commitments and wonder if the U.S. side will see through some of these commitments or concessions or agreements made and if they will be hit with new surprises. To me, I think we are in for more surprises, both good and bad surprises. And I think countries around the world have already and should, responsible governments are anticipating some of these possibilities, and they would, I would imagine, prepare a suite of responses as well.
I see. Well, now this hint of leniency from Trump comes after he unveiled a 25% tariff on all imported cars and light trucks starting next week, widening this global trade war. Dr. Loh, what are the potential implications of the 25% tariff on imported cars and light trucks for the U.S. auto industry, particularly in terms of, production costs, consumer prices, and relations with key trading partners like the European Union and Japan?
I think some of the implications are quite straightforward and what you would expect. So higher prices, less choices for American consumers. If this fully materializes, I think the big auto companies, non-American auto companies will be quite directly hit. And here I'm thinking of the Toyotas, the Hyundai, the Audis, and so on and so forth. In theory, on paper, the U.S. automaking industry will be quite happy, and some would certainly be, at least in the short term. But because of the complexity of supply chains, in fact, some American car makers, they have some production outside of U.S. as well and not completely done onshore. So it will be quite unclear what the net effects to American automakers will be. I think things will have to unfold before we can fully appreciate or comprehend the effects. What I will say is that we have already seen some non-American companies, automakers, shift production to the U.S. in different states, and I think that a global tariff will probably accelerate that move even more. The next thing to expect is, I think it's natural for Japan, South Korea, EU, Europe to prepare retaliatory measures as well, to target American goods as well. And if this escalates, which this seems to be, then it will quite evidently be detrimental to global trade and supply chains.
I see. Well, then, we've been talking about China in the earlier part of our conversation. Will these tariffs be a big blow to China as well, given China's push of EV vehicles?
To be honest, I don't think so, not really. I say that because they don't really sell EV cars in the U.S. Already. So the direct hit will be minimal. And if anything, it will simply firm up their resolve to de-risk, to invest in their own industry, EV industry, to restructure their own domestic economy. The EV industry as a whole in China is also a very tiny percentage of the overall GDP. So the economic angle there, or the economic detriment is not that great. But of course, symbolically, politically, as a big country, when another country does this to you, you have to react. So while the direct economic angle to this on EVs is not huge, but symbolically, politically, China will have to respond.
I see. Well, then, given the broader context of the global trade war, how might the imposition of the 25% tariff on cars and trucks further escalate tensions with the U.S. trading partners?
I note that tensions are already high. I think all countries with major accounts with Washington, which is basically most of the rest of the world, are already considering if they do not already have a suite of responses to react or to put out. So I expect governments to anticipate this, given what Trump has very clearly and early on signaled, even during his campaign. Of course, they will have to calibrate their response because not reacting is unacceptable domestically, but not reacting in a way that will really damage the relationship with America and with Trump is also equally important. For some countries who completely give in to Trump, and we see that in some countries where they promise that they will invest X amount of dollars into United States in exchange for dropping tariffs. So there are some responses out there, but they will be careful, they will be calibrated, because to be honest, no country would want to risk their relationship with the United States.
Right. Well, finally, Dr. Loh, domestically, though, what impact could the 25% tariff on imported cars have on U.S. consumers, both in terms of car prices and purchasing decisions, and how might it affect consumer sentiment, towards the administration's handling of trade policy? Is this a win for the American auto industry?
I would say that it's still too early to tell. There could be potential short-term gains for the auto industry, but the complexity and how embedded the global trade is such that some of these effects we will not be able to appreciate fully until it really materializes. In the short term, I think clearly when this fully is implemented, car prices, it's likely to increase. It's very likely that U.S. consumers will have less purchasing choices. They may shift how they purchase vehicles. Perhaps the resale market, they will turn to the resale market. You asked about potential negative sentiment to the administration. I suspect that this will not be done in a very direct way, because those that cannot afford cars in the first place is not factoring in their concern in any case. So I think that the negative sentiment is probably able to be constrained, especially if the Trump administration is able to send out the political message that actually this is going to be a win for the auto industry in American-made products, as he has done so quite consistently. And if he's able to successfully push out this narrative, the possible damage actually may not be that big.
I see. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Loh, for joining us and for your insights today.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. That was Dr. Dylan Loh, who is the Assistant Professor of Public Policy and Global Affairs at Nanyang Technological University. This has been The Big Story with me, Hongbin Jeong.
To listen to more great interviews, download our podcasts at audio.sg or download the audio app. That's AWEDIO, audio at the App Store and Google Play.